All right, everyone. Letitia James is in some hot water, along with all of the other people who attempted to persecute Donald Trump during the election for political reasons, as the appellate court has decided the fine against Donald Trump violates the Eighth Amendment, actually. It is an excessive fine. It was over $500 million. Now, Trump is a wealthy person, but that doesn't give the government the right to swoop in and rob you of, a significant proportion of your wealth. It never made any sense, nor did any of the other cases against Donald Trump. With the Mar-a-Lago reevaluation, that was completely lunacy, and resulted in the person prosecuting in that case actually having her own case. The Mar-a-Lago documents case, that fell apart, partially because it was salacious to begin with. So Donald Trump has won an unequivocal victory here. Now, the appellate court found that Donald Trump was indeed still liable for the original charges. They're just saying, hey, he doesn't have to pay this much because that violates the Constitution. It's an excessive fine. And indeed it is. A lot of people think, well, you're worth several billion dollars, so you must have several billion dollars on hand. You must have that in order to be able to pay the court costs. It's not the way that wealth works. That's the way that money works. If I have $100,000 in front of me, I have $100,000. If I invest that $100,000 into something that's making money, I don't have the $100,000 in front of me. I'm putting the money to work for me. Maybe it's a mutual fund. Maybe I've invested in a business or something like that. That's really the way that it works. It's the difference between the average person's mentality and the mentality of someone who is filthy rich. And Donald Trump is a multi-billionaire. He's filthy rich. They were trying to rob him, and they were also trying to interfere in the last election. They did so unsuccessfully. Being unable to formulate any other particular stratagem against him, what they did was try to cast him off to the public as being a hardened criminal. Well, he's committing fraud and reevaluating his properties the wrong way. He's doing terrible things, all of which were, by the way, white collar crimes that, generally speaking, would not result in this kind of debacle. He's evading his taxes. He pissed in the alleyway. Petty crimes, stuff like that. No, but being hyperbolic, of course. No, it's white collar crimes. And so what really happened is that the system, rigged as though it is, tried to stop Donald Trump unsuccessfully. He smirked, I'm sure, when he sat in the Oval Office again. When he sat in that chair, he chuckled to himself, and one of the first things on his mind probably was getting back at the people that had tried to persecute him and prevent him from taking office in favor of, Cankles and Cackles Harris. So he has won a victory here. The case will be ongoing. In the end, he may or may not be fully exonerated, though. They may drop the case in its totality. It could be that he suffers absolutely no penalty for the so-called crimes that he was suggested to have committed, because it's dragged along for a long time. He's the sitting president of the United States. He has enough money to fight the legal battle ad nauseum, and he's also aging. That tends to help. And there was never any real evidence of fraud there. It was always a salacious case. The same with, again, the Mar-a-Lago documents. I mean the classified documents and the Mar-a-Lago case there, with regards to the evaluation of the property. All of these cases have been nothing burgers. They are meaningless. Nobody cares. Also, these prosecutions wasted a shit ton of tax money. How many tens of millions of dollars do you think were expended trying to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president of the United States? And Friedman, one of the judges on this panel, they all voted in favor of him still being liable potentially, but they also said he's not liable to that amount. But Friedman wrote a dissent, and he said, well, this was so politically motivated, I don't even think he should be liable effectively, though going along the flow on this particular case. It's quite obvious that this prosecution was actually persecution. Yeah, he's the only one that's brave enough to actually state what is fairly obvious to many of us. Donald Trump was persecuted. I would prefer this particular opinion. If a person who is worth billions of dollars, who is a former president of the United States and an icon of Americana, especially from the 80s and 90s, if a person with that kind of clout can still be legally persecuted, and they can do it in a very, very public and naked fashion, by the way, and basically, chortle about it, what do you think they can do to you? I know a little bit about legal persecution myself. The fact is that the legal system is corrupt and broken, and it needs desperate reform. My hope is that when this all plays out, Donald Trump lashes out at them even harder and gives them a good spanking, because that's really what they deserve. Letitia James is an egotistical, self-righteous bitch, effectively. And we all know that. I'm sure that if you're watching this channel, 99% of you probably have come to that same understanding. Self-righteous bitch, just looking for pay and more fame, basically. Hey, I'm gonna prosecute Donald Trump. I'm gonna get that dude. It's basically what happened in multiple of these cases. I would note. Um, Donald Trump did not commit fraud. In my opinion, based on what very limited evidence that I've seen with regards to his tax returns, filing statements, his property evaluations, all of these things, he seems to not have actually broken any laws. I think that he's sort of like me, paranoid, almost. You're like, hey, I'm going to lash out the system. I'd better be careful about what I do. Yeah, so maybe I don't take this particular tax write-off or something like that. That's what I think he's like. Does he like to play the game? Yeah, absolutely. He loves it. It's basically his lifeblood. But he's mostly a property developer. He doesn't go and buy up casinos and stuff, although he tried to in Atlantic City. That didn't work out so well. And hawks merchandise and stuff like that. Okay, well, then what's the goddamn problem? I don't understand. He didn't defraud the government with his taxes or any of these things, and he was fully allowed to take his homework home with him with regards to the Mar-a-Lago documents. There's a reason you don't hear much about that case anymore. And Judge Engoron, he's basically a no-show at this point. This has happened multiple times already. This is just the latest iteration. You can look for the legacy media to try to make excuses as to why, well, this court's decision is bad. Donald Trump needs to be held accountable. He's worth several billion, so paying 500 million is no problem for him. Yeah, until you realize that virtually all of his net worth is loaded up into hotels and things like that, and you roll over the money that you get from those, the profit, and then you build another hotel. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of that particular industry. Or build another golf course or something like that. It's another funny thing. They criticize Donald Trump for playing golf. They never seem to criticize Joe Biden and his perpetual 3-day weekends in Rehoboth. That's about all. Peace out.